February 23rd, 1992. We're at the residence of Fred and Vivian L. Beckett, parents, in South Austin, 651 40th Street, to do a life history review. This mountain you're looking at is Mount Ogden, just at the head of 40th Street in South Ogden. And this is the home of my parents, Fred L. Beckett. This is Mount Ben Lomond from my parents' front porch. I'm Fred L. Beckett Jr., and I'm the youngest son of Vivian and Fred L. Beckett, and we're going to ask them some questions this afternoon about their family history. And I think we'd like to start with my mother. Her name's Vivian LaFern Hegstrom Beckett, and maybe you'd like to just go ahead and begin with your earliest ancestors that you can remember the history of, when they came to the United States and so forth. Go ahead.
Well, I'll tell you about my mother's family first. They came from Germany. But my grandmother first went, and when she was a young girl, she went over to Germany from Sweden, so she was really Swedish. And when she was over there, she met Grandpa, and they married and had 3 children. And then it was John, Fred, and Henry were born. No, many. It's that many. Let's see what I did pull the face. That many. And then George, and my mother, and Ed, and Henry were born over here. Now, and then my mother was born in Clarkston, Utah, the year 1889. Her birthday is June 7th. What? Now what?
Do you want your father?
My father was 15 when he came over. Him and his sister Aunt Emma came over first.
From where?
Sweden. Do
you remember what part of Sweden?
Hamburg, Sweden. That's where they lived. And
when would that be? In the late 1800s?
Yeah, that was in the 1800s too sometime, and I can't tell you when. And
well, who all came with them?
My dad and Aunt Emma came first, so let's call that quits for them two for a while. And then August and Otto and Gus were born here.
And they were your
no, they weren't born
brothers.
Here. They were brothers, but.
And what was their father's name and mother? Klaus Hegstrom, was that?
Klaus Hegstrom, you're right.
And what was it Elsie?
No, it was Johanna.
Oh.
Qualm. Oh, I'm thinking of Grandma Qualman now again. Her name was Catherine. I don't.
Catherine.
Catherine or something. Look on that paper. Maybe you better shut it off.
Okay, then your father's mother's your father's mother's name was what?
My father's wife was that Katharina.
Still back. Okay, we were talking about your father, John Hegstrom, and his father's name was Klaus Hagstrom, and his wife was
Louisa, Katrina
Olson.
Olson.
Okay, and they were married over in Sweden.
That's
and
right.
They came over here, and then they had who came with them? His sister.
His sister came with him, with Dad, Carl John Hagstrom first,
Okay, and what was her name?
and Emma.
And she died of TB.
Oh, I don't know what she died of.
She died of TB when she got to Ogden, didn't she? Isn't that where she died?
You're talking about Aunt Emma? She died in Ogden. Yes, her name was Sandstrom, and she had a family, but we don't know.
No.
Okay, and then later on, Grandpa Hagstrom and Grandma Hagstrom, or Dad, they brought with them. Let's see, Grandpa and Grandpa Hagstrom brought the boys, August Hagstrom and Gus Hagstrom and Otto Hagstrom. And now Dad and Aunt Emma are already over here, so that completes the family. And then now if you want
to know when all of your brothers and sisters.
Now you want my dad and.
Give the names of your brothers and sisters in the order they were kind of born.
Okay, Elvira was born in June 1907, I think.
You don't have to give all the dates.
Oh, we don't have to.
Just give their
and
names
Lil,
and who was born next. Yeah.
And Lil was born on the 22nd of September, and you don't want the year?
If you can remember it and want to give
well,
it. Sure.
Elvira was 4 years younger than me, so she'd be born older than me, I mean. And I was born in 1911, so she'd be born in 1902 when she, 2, 3, 4. Oh dear.
That's all right.
I don't think it was 1904. It was, anyway, she was born 4 years earlier than me, Elvira was. Then Lil was born September the 22nd in 1909. She was 2 years old. I was born I'm Vivian. I was born September the 11th, 1911. And then little Melvin was 2 years younger than me. He was born 1913.
And then he died at
and
what age?
he died at the age of 6.
And he died of what? Was that the one that died of
He died of what you call Bright's disease. Or dropsy. They also called it dropsy.
Nephritis too. Was that what?
No, it was just everything. His heart went bad, and well, he just died from all that. And then there's Luella, and I don't know when she was born in February. I know that, and that's enough. She was born in February, and she's 4 years younger than me.
And she died last year, didn't she?
Yeah,
1990
is when she died.
Yeah. Or 91. She died in 1991.
Okay, 1991.
Okay, and then who else?
And now we got Will and Melvin. And
did you mention Velma?
Did I mention Elvira? I did.
Yes.
Velma. Orion first. And I don't know when he was
That
born.
doesn't matter.
And then Orion and Evelyn and Laura and Curly and Willadine and Marlene. That's not in rotation, no Marlene.
And then there was Willis. Did you mention Willis?
Little Willis. He died when he was 6 years old. Melvin was 9 years old when he died. Now, if I've said it wrong.
When was Willis? Who did he follow in birth?
Willis was born
after who?
He was born between. Okay, he was older than Curly.
And he died in Primary Children's Hospital in Salt
Yeah,
Lake,
he died in the Primary Children's.
And he has TB of the bone or the spine.
Yeah, something to that effect.
Okay, and
And-
then now what about Aunt Anita? Did you
Well,
mention her? You
no.
didn't mention her.
She was my half sister and the oldest one. Her mother married Dad, and then when the twins were born, she died, and the mother died, and the twin 3 weeks later died. Grandma taking care of them, and Anita lived, and she lived to be in her 60s.
And she had a daughter named June.
She has a daughter named. She had a baby named Lawrence that died when he was 9 months old.
What did he die of?
Pneumonia, or yes, a strep throat is what he started out with, and well, that took him. And then let's see, I got him now.
Okay.
And then Marlene died. Willis, or
Yeah, who's living now? There's how many left of your sisters?
there's only myself, the oldest, and Evelyn is the next, and Willadine, and Harold R. Curly, we call him.
Mm-hmm.
And they were all born in central Idaho. We all were.
Mm-hmm.
And in a little country town, was really farming. There was one store and one church and one school.
What was it called? Central? Or?
Central Idaho. And I think about 160 families lived there and belonged to the Central at the time. And then I attended the school in Central. Elvira and Lil attended the school in Central, and then they went to Grace to finish high school. They eventually put 2 years of high school in Central, in that same building that the elementary school is in. And I went 2 years, and that's as far as I went in high school. Freshman and a sophomore. That's all.
And then you came down to.
And then I went to live with Emery and Neatha when I was 15 years old. And while I was in Central, living with them, I helped Emery need help. I even drove 4 head of horses and discaroled. I also milked cows. And then in when I was 19 years old, I came to Ogden and stayed with my sister Elvira and helped her because Dolly, her daughter, was born in April, and this was in March when I came. So then after that, I worked for a family, Andy Rosedall, for 50 cents a week.
A week?
Was it a day? Maybe day. I guess a day. See, you get a lot of back talk there. And then I met Fred Beckett, and we were married 1936 on July the 3rd, wasn't it?
Right.
Where did you meet?
We met down at Lil's, my sister's
Down at 27th and Grant.
Lil lived there.
Blind
In an
date or
apartment
something?
house.
Well, that's where I met him because he was there visiting
Oh, I
Lil.
see.
And then we went, then after that we started going together and married in 1936.
Well, that's great. Maybe we can stop for a minute now and have Dad give us some history of his family, and then we can have some questions directed towards both.
My dad was born in Birmingham, England in 1865,
What's his name?
and his name is Henry William Beckett Sr. And my mother's name was Harriet Underwood, and she was born in Smethwick, England. And they both came over here when they were about 17, and they were married in the Logan Temple.
They met over there though, huh?
They met over there.
Yeah.
And my dad's mother name was Mary Ann Riley, and
She wouldn't come.
She came over, but I don't know any statistics on her. And my mother's mother, his name's Sarah Ann Underwood, and she came over, and her husband wouldn't come because he was scared of the water, the ocean. He was really a coward when it come to being out on the sea. So he stayed in Smethwick. And then my dad had two sisters that I know. One was named Emily, and the other was named Ellen. And they both lived in Pocatello, Idaho, and they both died up in Pocatello. And then he had I don't know if it was a full brother or a half brother named Ernest Beckett, and he lived in, can you remember the place in Montana? We went to visit him, and a lady at a store called him up and told him that we was here, and they wasn't even interested, so we just canceled visiting Ernest Beckett.
That was up in Montana.
That was in Montana. His name was Ernest Beckett.
You don't know what town? Was it like Helena or
no,
or Bozeman or?
No, I can't remember.
Was it a big town or?
I'm telling you, when you get up around I'm 82 now. When you get up around that age, there's a lot of things you can't remember.
Well, give us the names of your brothers and sisters.
All right, my oldest brother named Lewis, and he lived several places. He lived in Evanston, Illinois, and he lived for a long time in Salt Lake, and he lived in Los Angeles. In fact, he died in Los Angeles. Then Harry William Beckett Jr. Was a manager of the old Reed Hotel, and they tore that down and built they called it the Bigelow Hotel first. Then later on they called it the Ben Lomond, and now it's called the Radisson. But he left Ogden a good many years ago and went to manage the hotel, and well, he was a catering manager of the Biltmore Hotel, and he held that job there as a catering manager for several years, and he died with cancer of the lip. He was a man that smoked cigars. He always had a cigar in his mouth. Now, I don't believe he ever took it out of his mouth. But anyway, it caused him cancer of the lip, and that's what caused his death.
That was Harry.
That was Harry.
What was his occupation?
Well, he run a merchandise, grain and produce brokerage business. And he started it in Salt Lake, and in Salt Lake they called it the Nelson Allred Beckett brokerage business. He'd buy and sell carload lots of fruits and vegetables. And he made he wanted to turn that business over to his sons, and they didn't want nothing to do with it. And he made all kinds of money at it. But Howard was the next brother that was born. His name was Howard Columbus Beckett, and he was a switch engine foreman at the Ogden Union Railway and Depot Company. And
and he marry Beatrice?
Yeah.
He married Beatrice Davis, and she died, I can't remember the year she died. And then he married a lady that was a widow to Kearns. They this Kearns run a cafe, and he died. And then after his death, Howard married her. She's still alive.
Well, now Howard and Beatrice had two daughters, Peggy and...
Yeah, they had two daughters. One was named Betty, and the other one was named Peggy.
That's right.
And they're still alive. She lived, Peggy lives in North Ogden, and the other one lives up in Oregon. I think it's Portland, Oregon. I'm not sure, but I think it's there.
Well, now, how many kids did Lewis have?
Oh, Lewis had a daughter and
What's her
3
name?
sons.
Remember the names?
Yeah, Grace was firstborn, and she's dead. And then the next one was Lewis Stanford Beckett, and he's still alive. And he lives somewhere in Arizona now. And then
There's one that lives in Provo, isn't there?
yeah, well, let me get to
Okay.
him. Now, and then the next one named Ralph, and he's a school teacher in California, and I can't remember the place he's at now. And then the next son, Donald, he has been an engineer for television, and he's quite an accomplished engineer in that line of work. And right now he lives in Orem, Utah. And that's the end of Lewis's family. And then Harry, he didn't have any children, but they adopted a boy named Edris Bray. That was his wife's sister's boy. And I think he finally took on the name of Beckett later on. And he lives in Los Angeles area. And then next one in line is Lawrence Underwood Beckett, and he married a girl named Eva Wheelwright, and they was only married about 3 weeks during 1918, and he got the flu. They had an epidemic, boy, and the people were dying like flies being put out of their misery.
What year did you say that was?
1918.
Yeah, that was quite a historical
Yeah,
epidemic,
well,
I think.
And someone wanted him to take a drink of whiskey, and he was a person that never wanted to touch alcohol or smoke or anything else. And I don't know whether I'd have helped him out or not, but he only lived 3 days after he got the influenza. And then the next one was born was my sister Ellen, and she's married to a fellow named Walt Coles, and he died, I don't remember the year, but it's been a good long time ago. And
He had a heart attack, didn't he?
yeah, he was
Quite young, was he?
he went down to the Eccles building to see Dr. Dumpke, and my sister was over in Ellen, that he married, was over in J.C. Penney's, and she heard a siren, and it was a siren taking him up to the hospital. The time they got him up to the D hospital, he was dead. So he had, I think he had a heart attack, what he had. He died a good many years ago. And
They
then
had what? How many kids they had?
they had 2 girls, Marion and Sharon. And Marion lives in Salt Lake, and Sharon lives here in Washington Terrace in Ogden. And
Sharon's married name is
Pearson. She married
Dale Pearson.
yeah, Dale.
And
Yeah,
then
Dale
Marion married a guy named Ed Kramer.
Yeah, named Kramer married
Yeah, that's right.
married in Salt Lake. And let's see, the next one down would be Clarence, and he was born in Ogden, Utah in March 1902. And then he married Can you remember Marge? Was
Oh,
Marge?
that's
Marjorie
right.
Harmon was her maiden name, and they had a boy named. They named him Harmon, and he died here in Ogden about been 2 or 3 years ago. We didn't even know he died, and they had the funeral, and we knew about it 30 minutes before the service, so we couldn't even go to his funeral. Then they had a daughter named, what was her name, Vivian?
Whose daughter?
Clarence's daughter.
Lois.
What?
Lois McFarland. She married him.
No, that ain't his daughter. That's, oh, you're really off the record. Doobie, they call
They
her.
call her Doobie.
Carol.
I can't remember her given name.
Carol Beckett.
Carol, yeah. And right now she's living in Wisconsin. And she'd been married 2 or 3 times, and the last guy she met in Wisconsin beat her up. And so she's having kind of a sad time of it. And she had some children, but I couldn't tell you how many. And then the next one would be
Harmon?
no, well,
That was their other child.
yeah, he was a firstborn.
He died
Oh,
of
and then they had a
aspergillosis.
son named Brent, and he lives in Thousand Oaks, California.
Harmon died of aspergillosis,
And then,
related to asthma.
but I had to laugh at Clarence. He says Brent, he was selling hospital equipment, different things they use in hospitals, and the company sent him to Chicago, and Clarence said, Brent's in Chicago and he's been to New York already. It struck me funny when he said that. And right now he's living back in Thousand Oaks. And then the next down the line would be Ray, and he married Rosalie, or
I thought it was Rosalia.
Rosalia, that's it, Rosalia Nielsen, and they were married and had 2 children, Ray Jr. and Janice, their daughter. And Ray Jr. lives in Salt Lake, and Janice lives in, ain't she in Salt Lake now? Yeah. And her husband works in a church office building.
Jack Purser.
Jack Purser, his name.
And then Mary Beckett is Ray's Jr.'s wife.
Oh, her name's Mary.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Ray married a girl named Mary, but I don't know her maiden name.
I can't remember what it is either.
There's too many things to remember, and especially when you're 82. All right, and then from Ray, there's Rhea. She was born in September the 9th, 1907 in Ogden. And she never did have any children. She'd been married about 3 times, and her present husband's name is Leonard Warren. And they both live now in Escondido, California. And she's in a wheelchair, and he does all the housework and the cooking and going to the store and what have you. He does everything. And he's in pretty good shape. So, but he says he don't drive a car at night anymore. Well, I got news. I don't either.
Mm.
I went up to Logan the other day and come back at dark, and it drove me nuts driving up through that Sardine Canyon, and with all the lights and that. All right, now we'll get down to the guy with the ultra stomach.
Did you get
Did you mention Ellen? You did, didn't you?
I was born May the 10th, 1909, at 2059 Ballantyne Avenue in the front room. And they tell me that in the days when I was born, the fee for a doctor to come and help the birth of a baby the fee was $15. So they get off pretty easy in them days to what they do now. They run up as high as $3,000 now. And then they called it Ballantyne Avenue then. Then they changed it to Gramercy. So I was born at 2059 Gramercy, and my dad built a house to the south of that. It was 2073 Gramercy, and I lived there up till I was 27. And when I was 17, I went to work down at the Ogden Union Railway and Depot Company as a messenger, and I made $2.16 a day as a messenger. And later on, I got a job as a crew caller, and it only paid about 50 cents more than the $2.16. And then I wanted to get a job as a yard clerk, and I had to go pass an examination, or an eye examination. I only had 20% vision in my left eye, and my right eye was in good condition, and I could have passed with it, but you had to have two good eyes to work as a yard clerk. So that was the end of that. And then, well, I worked down there for 2 years. And then from there, I went to Salt Lake, and I worked in the Hotel Little as a bellhop. And I worked there about, a year and a half. And then I come back to Ogden. Then I went to work at the Healy Hotel. And
As a bellhop too, or
no, I was their maintenance man down there.
no?
I took care of their boiler and took care of their plumbing and what lighting things that I could do. I took care of that, and then I took care of the elevator and took care of the maintenance on the elevator.
Where did you get all your training for all that?
Well, I just
Picked it up, or?
picked it up. But anyway, before that though, I worked at Bert Critzlow. Boy, it wasn't for him. There's a lot of things I learned for him at when it was called the Biglow. And he taught me a lot in plumbing, a real lot. And then that's when I left there and went down to the Healy. And that was I left the Healy in 1941, and I went to work out at Hill Air Force Base as a classified laborer. Then I got into the carpenter shop as a carpenter, and then I worked there about until from 41 to 1945, and they needed some personnel out in Wendover at the 317th Sub Depot, and there was a Major DeBerry requested that if somebody had the qualifications of taking care of boilers and kitchen equipment and stuff like that, why they wanted somebody of that category. So I went out there, and I was out there from 1945. I was out there 2 years and a month, and I could see the end of the war coming. So I thought, well, I better be getting out of here. So tried to come back to Hillfield, and they didn't have nothing open, but they did at 2nd Street. And I went out there and went to work in the kitchen equipment, and refrigeration department. Then they was going to have a reduction in force, and I got up to a grade 10, and they wanted to cut me down to about a grade 7, and I said, well, I ain't going for that. I worked too long now to take that much of a deduction in wages. And they said, well, there's one thing you can do. You can monitor into Hill Field. So that's what I done. I monitored into Hill Field, and I went in there as a plumber. And that's where I retired in 1971, in January 1971. So I've had a lot of experience in plumbing. And now I'm a retired plumber. And that's about the end of my story.
Well, what about Ellen Beckett? Did you mention her and Henry?
Oh, well, Ellen Beckett, Ellen Beck it is. She married a guy named Beck. And he was sure a nice guy. I never met him.
That was your sister, wasn't it?
That was my dad's sister.
Oh, okay. I was mixed up.
Her
right.
name was Beckett,
Yeah.
and she married before that, she married a guy named Colton. And they had a boy named George, and he got killed driving down a street in Pocatello, and somebody hit him broadside and killed him. And that's been a long time ago. And then that Emily is my dad's sister. Emily, she had 2 sons, and I've even forgotten their names. Oh, Clifford and Alfred. And they were both on a ship, and the ship was sinking, and they both jumped off and was picked up. They had life preservers on, and they were picked up by a boat that was in the water, so they didn't lose their lives.
Where was that at? I mean, what?
Well, they were down in well, I can't remember exactly where they was at, but they was on this ship that got hit with a.
It wasn't military though. It was like a passenger.
Yeah, it was a passenger liner.
What year was that? Do you remember? Or
I can't remember that. That's a long time ago. Well, is that enough?
Well, maybe you want to tell about where you two got married and where you've lived.
And the kids you haven't mentioned.
In Wendover.
Well, we went out to Wendover, and you was just a little tiny kid. He was a baby. Then I remember Lawrence wanted to go down to the Western Pacific Depot down there, and there was something about them trains that fascinated him. So I thought, well, I'll put a scare into him. So I got right up. Whenever a train pulled in there, the rear brakeman had to protect the rear end of the train, and they have to walk a certain distance from the rear end of the train. And then when the train's ready to go, the engineer will call the brakeman in. So I got right up by the locomotive when they was going to call this brakeman in, and boy, I'm telling you, that sound of that whistle made his hair stand straight up. That kind of took the wind out of his sails. He didn't want to wander down there anymore. Then I remember I had a Model A Ford then, and I went down to the base in it, and when I come back, I went to stop, and he was standing up, and when I stopped, his whole face and that went right up into the dash of the Model A, and geez, I felt sorry that I bounced him into that dash. I'll never forget that. And then another thing that was comical about Lawrence in Wendover, we went to a sacrament meeting out there, and when they passed the sacrament, when he took the bread, he says, "This is sure good bread, isn't it?" I'll never forget that. And then, what was it Vernon done out there? You remember?
He was, he just went to school and then helped a boy deliver papers.
Yeah, I knew he'd done something. I couldn't remember all of it.
Now, Vernon was born here in Ogden before you went out there, too.
Yeah, he was born in
October,
the D Hospital.
1936. Was it
1937.
37, and then Lawrence was born in April. He was born April 28th,
41.
1941, and I was born in April 2nd, 1943, and Janet was born in July the 6th, 1956. Was it 56?
Well, it was quite a while. We didn't think we was ever going to get another kid, and we made it.
Yeah. And so, what year did you move here to 40th Street?
Well, we bought this lot in what year was it?
We moved
45,
here.
wasn't
Yeah, we moved here in 45.
it? Yeah, and then
And then lived
we,
in the
we
basement.
made a basement home, built a basement home, and we lived here till about 1952 when we built up on it.
Mm-hmm.
And ever since we built up on it, things started to get higher and higher.
And
You
more
know what?
traffic.
When we poured the foundation, this cement was 50 cents a sack. Now it's $4.50 a sack.
How much did the lot cost? It was cheap.
It
too,
was
right?
$800.
800.
Yeah.
And how much did it cost to build this home?
Well, I got a lot of overtime when I was out in the Wendover,
Mm-hmm.
and I saved up quite a bit of money, and then Vivian saved money, and we paid cash for a lot of stuff when we built the basement home. But when we built up, I took a loan from the Davis County Bank for $5,000 to build the rest of the house.
And how many year long? Do you remember?
Well, I through Equitable Life Insurance Company after we got started on the home, and they come out and looked the home over. Why, they took over the $5,000 and then paid the bank off.
So how many years did
So
you
I
pay?
was only paying. I paid about $90 a month to the Equitable Life Insurance Company for the payments on the $5,000. Then, like I say, with what money I earned, I bought stuff and as we went along. Then I paid Harry Greenwell was a bricklayer, and I paid him off. Then I bought the brick from the Salt Lake Brick Company. This is called Salt Lake Red, this brick in this house.
Well, what about Mom? She worked too, didn't you, for off and
Yeah.
on? Where was the first place you
I
worked?
worked at Quinn Garment Factory for 7 years. And then I went to Defense Depot and worked 22 years and retired at the age of 72. And I retired in 1983.
And you know, when we was building this house, she'd help me on it. And where the beam that runs through the center of the house and the subfloor, boy, she put about 50 pounds of nails in them boards.
I don't lie.
Boy, you was sure driving a lot of nails, I'll tell you.
Well, I didn't want it to squeak, and it doesn't squeak.
Well, I can remember helping put insulation in and
Yeah.
stuff was when we built up,
Yeah.
and I can remember that every nail was cursed with a lot of four-letter words and other words.
Then Vernon, he was always going somewhere. He couldn't stay around here long enough to help you doing
I
it.
and him got up on this roof after it was still tar paper, part of it, and we put the rest of the tar paper on because it was going to rain, and we were living in the basement at the time, and we had the roof where it go up as far as the roof. I remember that, Vernon and I. finished with the tar paper up there. Fred was to work.
And I remember you built an old chicken coop and an old barn, and we had cows and chickens and pigs, and we had a little
Plenty-
farm out there too.
And plenty to eat, didn't we?
Yeah, we had a wonderful garden for years, and there was hardly any traffic when you moved here. And
I don't think there was 12 cars went up here in 24 hours. Now there's 12 every second, 30 seconds.
just know that who you are is
Oh.
in this group.
Okay.
This is Vernon Beckett. He's the firstborn in this family, and he just arrived, and,
And I
he's,
have the birthright, right?
and he's going to ask some questions now.
Okay. This idea to get together as a family and get some history has been something that I've wanted to do for a long time. I took a class several years ago in getting oral history from people who lived at a time that we really can't relate to because we didn't live then. So some of the questions I'm going to ask now are primarily concerned with lifestyle and the things that were done back in the early 1900s, the period of time when our parents, Fred and Vivian here, were born. I'll just start with a simple question regarding their daily diet. Mom, back when your earliest recollection, what was your breakfast like? What did you have for breakfast when you were a youngster?
Usually they kill pork and put it in brine, and we'd have bacon and eggs and cereal, cooked cereal, wheats, different wheat kinds of wheat.
Did you ever have any fruits at all for breakfast?
No, we never ate fruit for breakfast.
So your diet was mainly
They couldn't get fruit
bacon and eggs and
and milk.
bread and milk. How about you, Dad? What did you have?
Well, we'd have a cereal like some rolled oats, and always have milk. And I remember my mother would always send me down to. There was a store called Piggly Wiggly, and I'd go there and get a pound of cheese, and I'd go to another store and buy a couple of cans of canned milk.
And how much did you pay? I'll bet it was cheap.
Yeah, well, a can of milk then was about 10 cents a can, and cheese was about 15 cents a pound. And then my dad was mixed up in a business called a Mutual Mercantile Association. And they had a couple of drivers driving Model T Fords that deliver the groceries out of it. This was later on, though, that this took place. And he was with that Mutual Mercantile for 2 or 3 years. And then
What were they, a grocery wholesaler or something? Or
no, they'd have people call in, and
they deliver right to the house,
yeah, they deliver in these Model T Ford trucks.
like they used to deliver milk?
Yeah, and I can remember that.
Did you also? I was going to ask her. Did you also have corned beef? Did they soak the
that we
beef in
had.
brine and make corned beef?
Not that I remember. They used to make head cheese out of the pork, and then we had beef, but not nearly as much beef as pork because they could sell their calves and
Get more money out of it.
yeah, and they
I bet you ate lamb though, didn't you?
not too much
Didn't you?
until when I went to
more
live with
mutton.
Emily Hanson and Anita, my sister wife. Emily went into the sheep business a lot, and he had a lot of pet lambs. He used to follow us around. We'd feed them when they were little, and then they'd finally kill them to eat.
Didn't your dad used to go
Bum
down,
lambs, that's what they call
Yeah.
bum lambs.
go down to the Snake River or the Portneuf River and get sacks of
Oh, they
fish?
used to go fishing with folks.
You,
and
you lived on a lot of
people up
fish.
there. Yeah, they cook fish, and
What kind
we
of
had
fish?
chicken.
Remember what kind they were? They weren't trout, were they?
I don't think so, but I can't tell you.
But
Name some. Down between,
Bass.
it was between Lava Hot Springs and Bancroft and that river there. Now, tell me what they had. I don't know, but
Whitefish, herring. I bet that's what.
oh,
they
they
were.
used to have herring, but I think they bought that and they used to put a rind on that of some kind.
Anyway, so your diet consisted mainly of things that you could grow or that you
Potatoes,
you raised or stuff like that. You very
Vegetables.
seldom you went like they used to go to a store and load up the wagon and come back from the store. You didn't do that.
Mostly vegetables, and then sometimes when they never had the vegetables in the winter, they buy canned food.
Oh, they did.
Some go to Bancroft and that. I remember they used to take eggs to those little towns, and
Was Bancroft kind of the rail center up there? I mean, is that
yeah,
where?
even with the main Oregon Short Line went right through Bancroft.
So that's where you'd usually go, rather than say Preston or.
Oh, we never went near, not that far, Chief.
How far was it to Bancroft?
Oh, about 7 miles,
Was it?
maybe not quite that far. And we
Did you ever ride on the train?
When I come to Ogden to visit one time, and then I went back on it.
Did it scare you?
No, I wasn't scared at all. That's about all once I rode. See,
What line did you ride on?
I can't tell you that. I guess it was the Oregon Short Line.
Oregon Short Line.
They went into Pocatello first, and we had to wait there, and then for a while, and then we went right
And then
through the
you went from Oregon to from Bancroft to Pocatello down to Ogden,
No, well,
or did you just go to Pocatello?
we went to Pocatello from here. I did.
I see.
Well, then the other way opposite, I went to Bancroft and caught it. Got on
Oh,
the
you
train.
had to get on a different train to go to Bancroft.
Yeah,
Okay.
they switched.
Let me ask you about your sleeping arrangements when you were kids, when you were young. Did you have your own rooms, or did you?
I was born in a log cabin, 2-room log cabin, and we all were, but we had a granary and Dad added on to the granary a nice little shed, and we used to sleep there in the summertime, most of the kids.
Child.
But and then we had a little shanty back of our 2-room log cabin too, and we used to sleep in that.
Well, did you have regular beds, or did you just bunk on the ground, or what?
No, we had beds and cots. We had a cot that opened up, 2 leaves on it, and then we also had beds. Not fancy ones. They were more or less. You see them these
Straw mattresses or horsehair
straw. A lot
mattresses?
of straw mattresses.
You didn't have any grandma feather beds back then.
No, Grandma had them, but Grandma called them, but we didn't.
Okay. How about transportation? I see a lot of pictures of people on horses and wagons. Do you remember riding much in a wagon to go anywhere, or riding a horse to go anywhere, or what?
Yeah, we used to ride horses all the time. We'd go up to the little central store and buy things up there and get the mail. And then as I got a little older, about 12, I remember Uncle Ed had a Model A Ford. He had a Model T first, and I had no desire to drive that because you'd have to crank it in the front, make it go. Well, he finally got a Model A Ford, and I wanted to drive it, and he never would let me. So I watched where he put the key. He was down home there helping Dad in the hayfield. And I watched where he put the key. I knew I could drive it. And when they were out in the field, I went and got in that car, turned around and went out the gate and went up to the corner a mile and turned around and come back, and he was coming up from the field. He was walking. And boy, I got that key back in place, and he never hit me or anything, but he said, don't you ever do that again. I
How old
says,
were you?
oh, I guess I was about 11 or 12. And I said, well, I was fascinated by your car and you wouldn't let me drive it. And I knew I could do it. And now I'm satisfied. I will never do it again. But he sure balled
Do
me
you
out.
remember how much a car cost then? One of those Model A's?
I don't remember.
$800.
$800? How old were you when you drove your first car?
Oh, I was about 17, 18.
Whose car was it?
It was a Model T.
Whose car? Was it one of your uncles or brothers?
No, my dad had a Model T. You know, he was used to driving a Model T, and when he got a Model A, he got up early one Sunday morning, and that's when they had a garage at 2059 Gramercy. We was living in 2073, but he had I think he had Clarence backing in the garage so he could drive straight out, and he used had a hand feed, and he used that, and he got a motor revved up pretty fast, and he come up the driveway out of 2059 Gramercy and made a right turn to go down to 21st Street. But he was going so doggone fast, and he lost control of the car, and he drove it right into the front porch at 2073. And geez, I thought an airplane had hit the house. I was in a front bedroom there, and it scared the life out of me. Woke me up from the crash.
Stop.
Hank. He had it like that, and if you hold a crank like that and it backfires, it'll throw the crank right out of your hand. Well, he didn't know that, and he broke his arm, and boy, from then on he was disgusted with that Overland. Then it wasn't, see, that was a Model T, and then he got the Overland. Then from there he went to the Model A.
Did you own your own car before you got married?
Yeah.
What did you own?
I owned a Model T coupe. First I had a Model T sedan, and then I got rid of that and got a Model T Ford coupe.
When you were courting this woman, what were you driving?
It was a Ford.
Yeah, it was a Model T Ford.
There wasn't a coupe.
Huh? It was a coupe.
It was, okay. To have a rumble seat in the back?
No.
Okay.
No, they didn't make rumble seats
then.
Pontiac made them, because Clarence Anderson bought one. I remember riding in the rumble seat.
When did you take your first ride on a train? How old were you?
When I worked on the OUR&D company, when I was a messenger, they'd give me a pass from here to Salt Lake. And like a dummy, I opened the window, and the coach that I was riding in, a damn cinder got my eyes and like to drove me nuts. So I should have never opened the window.
So you'll have some memories of that.
Yeah.
We'll take you over to Durango, Colorado, and let you ride that train from Durango to Silverton, and you'll remember what it was like. They have a narrow gauge railroad over there.
Well, they use a steam engine that's coal fired.
Exactly. Yeah, just like in the old days. When did you ride on a train? Just the one from
Just
up
the
there
one.
down there?
But I also was going to tell you, we used to ride the school in what they called a school wagon when there was no snow, and it was a sled in the wintertime with a cover on. And
Horse drawn?
two horses. That's right. And then I remember Dad bought I think it was an Overland he bought. Oh, anyways, it sounds like it was an Overland because it was over something.
Okay.
And Lil and I went for a ride in that, and she drove. We had to go up the hill it was kind of steep, and it killed the engine. And she says, "Whoa!" And back down. And she said, "Whoa!" It was backing down. They turned and went into knocked down. Then Stanton was her name. Their fence.
That's up in Central.
That was in Central.
Okay, tell me about your first airplane ride.
Me?
Yeah.
Well, in 1929, there was, I can't remember who the guy was with me. We went to Salt Lake, and there was a fellow named Hal Rehart. He'd been an Army flyer, and he took people up for about a 15-minute ride, and they charged $5. That was in 1929, and I didn't know whether I wanted to go up in or not. They had a devil of a time trying to start the engine on it. And they finally got it started, and it started spitting and sputtering. And I thought, brother, we won't get anywhere in that.
What kind was it?
It was a two cockpit airplane, just
One seat in front and one in back.
yeah.
That's funny. I went up in a Navy plane. That my first one when I was a Boy Scout.
Yeah.
We got our uniforms. They took us up for about 5 minutes.
Well, I had about a 15-minute ride in it, and after it went down the runway and took off, boy, I was a bit scared of it then. After they let it warm up though for about 5 minutes before it took off.
Have you been in an airplane long?
Then the next airplane I rode in was a C-47 out of Hill Field. Ken Burnham, a plumber, and me was told to go out to Wendover and pick up 10 mechanically cooled drinking fountains, and we was gonna bring them back to Hill Field to be used at Hill Field. These drinking fountains, and the crew chief on the plane says, you got to wear a parachute, and he says, if anything happens, I'll push you out of the plane. I says, oh no, you won't. I'll ride it down. And then there was a lieutenant colonel wanted to get some flying time in. Believe it or not, he flew that plane up as far as Pocatello and back to Hill Field, and we wasn't no time going up there and back. And then I remember Ken, when they banked the plane, and he'd looked out of one of them, they had like porthole windows, and he says, do you think it's all right? That was his first ride. And he was really shook up when they banked the plane.
Well, have you ever been in a plane, Mom?
No, and that's not all. I'll never be in one because you won't get me in an airplane. I'll die on the ground.
You grew up in a generation that feared airplanes, right?
I never did like them.
Did you know that that's the major way we travel today?
That's right, but not mine.
You know, Gene Shalit on that Today program,
Uh-huh.
he'll never ride in an airplane.
Is that right?
And then, you know, Madden, the sports guy,
Mm-hmm.
he don't ever ride in an airplane. He takes the train.
Well, everybody has their own reasons for not flying, huh? Okay, I'm going to try to hurry along here through some of these things.
What's the next on the...
I was just going to ask you about the radio and when you first remember the radio becoming a part of your life. The radio was invented, of course, during your lifetime.
Yeah, but when I was a small kid, I had a crystal set.
Crystal sets, yeah. We made those when we were kids.
And I was scared to death to let my folks know I had it. So there was a little shed in back of the house, and I used to go out there and listen to it out there with earphones on. Then finally they found out I had it, and they thought it was all right, but I was scared to death they wouldn't approve of me having a crystal set radio.
Why would
I don't know, I just had that idea. And then right after that, my dad, being a carpenter, he put 3 2x4s up, and then some cross pieces, and then 2 2x4s above that, and then a single one above that, and bolted them all together. And then we raised it up and fastened it against a chicken coop, to start in with. Then we put about, well, there must have been about 8 guy wires on it to hold it. And that was a first antenna we had for a radio they bought for in the house. And it was one of them that had an oval type roof on the television. It was a Philco.
That was your first radio, it was a Philco radio.
Yeah. And
Oh,
boy, it was all glued to listen to that radio.
well, Mom, did you have a radio in your home? Do you remember?
No, not then. Mother got one later, but Neath and Emery had one while I was living there with them, and it was a cabinet.
Do you remember what you used to listen to?
Well, I don't remember. You know, we always had it on when we were in the house. So all I can tell you about.
Do you remember what you used to listen to?
What?
What you listened to
what
on the radio?
program?
No,
What
I
impression?
can't remember now.
Walter Winchell or
I used to listen to a lot of records. I remember one lady singer, Jane Froman. And I used to love to hear her sing. And then there used to be records of Eddie Cantor, and I used to listen to Eddie Cantor.
How about Al Jolson?
Yeah, and I listened to his song.
Do you remember having a phonograph? Did either of your families have a phonograph?
Yeah, you bet.
The old kind you wound
Yeah.
up.
what they call those? What did they call them?
Victorola.
Yeah, that's
Victorola. Yeah.
My folks' mother didn't have one, but people around there did. And Anita had a phonograph at one time, too, that we used to listen to.
A lot of people back in those days, before they had radios and phonographs, had to create their own entertainment, and they had musical instruments around. Some of them were really unusual. They had things like wash tub basses, and they play a washboard, and they do all these kinds of things that Spike Jones' band used to do for fun. They used to do because they didn't have any other thing to entertain themselves.
Is he still alive, old Spike Jones?
I think he's passed away, but I'm not positive.
Boy,
I think
he
he
was
died
sure a
several
crazy guy, I'll tell you.
Yeah, he was. Well, what are some of the instruments you had in your family, or did you have any musical instruments?
Well, there was a neighbor kid that played a trumpet, and he showed me a few things about it, and I could play one tune on it. The tune was "Time on My Hand."
Is that
And
right?
I could play that on that trumpet.
Well, that's pretty good. How about you, Mom?
Well, Emery Hansen had an orchestra, so they'd come there and practice. So we'd hear plenty of that. And then my mother could play a accordion. Grandpa and Grandma brought from Qualman brought.
A concertino, they call it.
Concertino, that little thing they go in and out
Yeah.
like that.
Little
Yeah.
squeeze ball.
Yeah.
And my mother could play any kind of a
Didn't
guitar.
they play a mouth organ too, a harmonica?
Oh yes, and mother could play a mouth organ. She could play an organ. She has full of music.
Well, didn't your sister Luella play
She played in the orchestra.
played in the band, the piano? Who gave her piano lessons?
Well, she had a friend, and she learned to play through her,
Is that
Gladys Holstein,
Is that right?
and she picked it right up. Oh, there was music in our family, but I wouldn't.
Yeah, your brother Curly played guitar, and
Marlene did too.
Marlene
Yeah.
played.
And sang.
She could yodel.
Mother
country.
could sing
She could.
one time.
Well, now we come to the part about pets. What kind of pets did you have back in those days?
Well, our pets were dogs and cats, but mother never allowed them in the house. They always had to sleep in the barn. And when we'd milk the cows, we used to put a little milk in a container, milk in a little container, and let the cats and the dogs drink that.
that mainly were your pets, so
Yeah,
dogs and cats.
that's all we ever
They
had.
had to stay outside.
Yeah, they slept in the barn.
Boy, did you hear that, Gisela?
And then up in the hayloft. They used to love to get up in the hayloft. What else?
Friends. Who were your friends? Your brothers and sisters, or?
Oh, I had a friend by the name of Geneva Hanson, Juanita Simonson, and Lila Welch. Well, I had friends when I was young. We used to go to dances. Boy, did we enjoy the dances.
That's good.
Ballroom dancing. And another thing, when I went to school, I was on a baseball team. And another thing, do you want to talk about religion?
I'll talk about anything you want to talk
And
about.
when I was at home before I came down here, I was quite young when I was a primary teacher for the Bluebird class. I was also a Sunday school teacher for the 8-year-olds up there. And I worked in the Mutual. I was the dance director before I came down to Ogden. And the Green and Gold Ball, I and Austin Christensen was my partner, and we'd go to Grace and learn it. From the Cleggs were the state officers, and we'd learn the ball, Green and Gold Ball, and then we'd come back and try to teach the
Where were
Central Art.
Cleggs from? Were they from Soda Springs?
They were from down the valley, Thatcher way. And that was it. And we used to have little plays in the Mutual, and I had one called I played one they called Whittling, and a fellow by the name of Glenn Anderson was my dad.
In the play.
We used to put little Mutual plays on and go from little town to little town, like Bancroft, Talmadge, and
Kind of like the road shows that we have now or did have.
I took the part of the Queen in our work.
So you were in drama then, huh?
Yeah, for the Green and Gold Ball. Yeah.
Dad, did you have very many friends, or what was your social life like?
Well, there was a kid named Bud Lund that I used to play with, and his dad was a bishop in the 4th Ward. And then he had a brother named Gordon Lund. And Gordon Lund laid the tile in the basement of this house. And it wasn't long after that Gordon died. And Bud's dead now too. He was
K. Ed
he was manager of the Washington Market years ago when it was.
Oh yeah.
Remember Washington Market?
I sure do.
And
Then later was the California Free Market, wasn't it?
No, Washington Market on between 24th and 25th on the east side of Washington. And then after that, he went to work for the Smiths up here on the one on Harrison there, right north of 32nd Street in Harrison.
But wasn't Kay Edson one of your friends when you were a kid?
Yeah, Kay Edson.
Yeah, I delivered newspapers to him, remember?
Yeah. Yeah, Kay Edson. His wife died. They lived down here on 39th and Kiesel. And his wife died. Then last I remember, he married a woman from Salt Lake, and I think they moved down, and he moved down to Salt Lake and lived and she owned a house down there. That's the last I've seen of him, and that's been 10, 15 years ago that he moved down there. Then there was another kid named Alec Ferguson, and he lived at 2112 Monroe in the rear. You know what was funny about living in the rear there? His mother used to call up some woman that she knew, and she says, "You'll have to come and visit me. I live in the back house." You know, the outdoor toilet they call the back house.
Oh, really?
But
You didn't have one of those though, did you?
what, a back house?
Yeah. Did you ever have an outside toilet?
No, they run a toilet in 2059 Gramercy. Well, it's always been a toilet in that house, as I remember. A bathtub, basin, and a toilet.
But Mom, you had the old outhouse, didn't you?
At the old outhouse, and we also had lamps that we had burnt coal oil in to get our lighting at night.
Wow. So when you had to go out in the middle of winter, you had to go outside.
Yeah, we'd always go early though.
Would you?
Yeah. So we got along fine. I don't know, everything just worked along okay. We never even had lights, see, electric lights.
In your
Power,
home,
yeah.
you never had power in your home.
No, but the power
Well,
company.
Emery Hansen used to have a 32-volt
Generator.
Delco.
power. The
Delco,
Delco,
they
yeah,
were
they called it Delco.
But you didn't.
No.
You heated your home with wood and
And
coal and lighted it with coal oil lamps.
That's right. Some people had what they called a gas lamp
Well, you was a pioneer.
that had 2 wicks on them. And Aunt Dora and Uncle Otto had one of those.
Did you get cold in the winter?
No, we always had it was warm. Got a little heater in the bedroom and in the kitchen at coal range, but we was always warm. They used to bank the fire at night.
Well,
And we used to we used to have milk and bread for toast for supper a lot.
oh, did you really?
Bread and milk for supper.
Bread and milk was a
That's
I've
right.
had that for supper. Bread.
That
and milk.
used to be a staple. They butter the bread and warm the milk and
Yeah.
put the bread in it. I was going to ask you about some of the skills that you learned, and then what your first jobs were. The very first job that you took outside of what you had to do in the home.
Well, me and Kay Edson both used to cut lawns up on Swanner Place. The place up there called Swanner Place, and there was a couple of lawyers lived up there, and then a guy that was a big shot in Ogden livestock, and then a guy run a bookstore, and well, anyway, I took care of about 3 lawns up there. That's one of the first jobs I had, cutting and watering lawns up there. And then before I ever got around Bert Critzlow, I used to do a little plumbing on faucets and take them apart and put new washers on them. And
Where did you work with him?
who?
Critchlow.
At the Beckett
Hotel?
Hotel.
Oh, he was the maintenance guy.
He was a building engineer.
Well, that's the same thing.
Yeah, then I worked there in maintenance too.
So you learned how to do that from him.
Yeah.
And what did you learn, Mom?
Well, I went and would pick potatoes when the season was dry.
Did you get paid for it?
Yeah.
How much?
I don't
50
remember,
cents
not
a
very
week.
much. But that was one job I had, and then of course I lived with Emery and Nika then, and they bought clothes for me and what have you. But my mother was a beautiful seamstress.
I was going to say, do you remember either of your parents making their own clothes?
I sure do. My mother sewed all the time, and after Dad died, he'd had a real nice suit that was practically new, and she made her a lovely skirt out of it.
But they'd buy the cloth and then they'd sew it.
Yeah.
They didn't have to go out and shear the sheep and card the wool and all that.
No, mother sewed, and she just had a good head for knowing how.
She bought her mother a washing machine, a gas-powered washing machine.
Is that right?
After I come to Ogden.
Do you still have it?
No.
Okay, what did you do for recreation back then in those early days?
Go to picture shows.
Well, what we did at Idaho
You went
was
to dances.
and that was great. That was a great.
Did you ever have horse races or
Oh, they used to have 4th of July celebrations and have races like that.
car races?
No, but horse ponies. And did I love to ride pony? I even went down on our pony called Peggy to pick up the other herd of horses from in the neighbor's field. And when I got about a mile from where our horses were with their herd of horses, a stallion came with his tail up in the air, and boy, did I turn and go for home in a hurry. And he went back, but Peggy fell, and I went in a badger hole, and I went head over.
How old were you?
Oh, I was just a kid, about 9 or.
Did you get
10.
hurt?
Oh, kinked my neck a little bit, but I lived. I never did none. Now, maybe that's why I get headaches. I don't know. But it wasn't a weekend. And Mother made mine when I graduated from the 8th grade. She made me a real nice boiled dress.
I remember back in those days, a lot of times families would get together for recreation. They just visit. We've kind of lost that art of conversation and visiting that they used to have back then because of television and the way our lifestyles changed. Do you remember meeting together with your different families and uncles and aunts and
Boy, I sure do. We
having dinners and doing
all,
things together?
that's all they did was invite each other to dinners.
All they do is eat.
And then at Christmas, we went to a lady by the name of Tekla Peterson. One Christmas, and we had the best time. She had one of those old phonographs you're talking about, and we danced in her house. And
Where did she live?
she lived in London,
Oh,
not too far away.
that's before you were married.
Oh yeah, that was before I ever come to Ogden. And I told you about when I came to Ogden.
You told us about the things you did in church. What did you do in church? Were you very active in the church?
Well, when I was around 12 years old, the bishop got up and I was the only deacon present at sacrament meeting. And they had to use teachers and priests to help pass the sacrament. And he commended me for being the only deacon there in the old 4th Ward.
Who was he?
It was Bishop Lund.
Do you remember David O. McKay coming to your home as a ward teacher?
I don't remember him coming to the home, but I remember where he lived down on Madison. He only lived about a half a block from the 4th Ward.
Somebody told me, Rhea told me that he used to come to your home as a ward teacher.
Oh, I know. Well, Jake Garn lived in your ward, didn't he? His parents or something.
Who?
Jake Garn, the senator. Didn't his
No,
parents live in
never
your
heard of
ward
him.
or stake? Well, I always
Not
heard
that I
someone
remember.
told me that. I don't know who it was.
Do you remember when you were baptized?
Yeah,
Where were you baptized?
in the 4th Ward on Madison, just south of 21st and Madison.
Were you baptized when you were 8?
Yeah. And the bishop then, when I was baptized, was E.A. Olson. He was the bishop.
Who baptized you? Your dad
I can't remember.
or one of your brothers?
No.
Were your brothers active
No.
in the
not
LDS
too
church?
active.
Were you active?
Well, like I say, I used to,
You were a deacon.
yeah, when I was a deacon, I used to go regular to sacrament meeting and priesthood meeting. And
Did your parents join the church over in England? How did the family ever get
well, I was
introduced
married
to the
in the
church?
Logan Temple.
But they were like converted before the whole
Oh yeah, they come over here on account of.
church. And what about the one that wouldn't cross the water? Was he a member too?
No, he wasn't a member of the church.
But his wife was.
Well, yeah, she came over here and she, I guess, took out her endowments there.
But you don't know who the people were that converted them. Any of the history of the missionaries?
No, I don't have any.
Or what year it was and who actually joined
No.
first. And what about in your family?
Well, Lindquist, some of the older Lindquist that went to Sweden, and that's who converted my dad and his family. And I don't know who converted Grandpa and Grandma Qualman, but they all come over for the church and all went through the temple.
It was on Clyde Lindquist. It was Clyde Lindquist's father, I think.
Yeah,
Well, did any of them join over there that didn't come over here? I mean, join the church?
No, all.
Only ones that joined came over here.
Was my parents, great grandparents, not my great grandparents.
Would you like to go to Sweden, where your folks came from?
If I didn't have to go by plane,
How about by boat?
oh, I guess I wouldn't mind the boat. I've been on the boat, so I don't know.
Okay,
But I'm not so fond of that kind of stuff.
aren't you?
Nah.
What about you?
What, about an airplane?
Oh, he rode them.
Well, I ain't scared of an
You wouldn't be
airplane.
afraid to fly on a 727 or a 737 or a 747?
Or a C-47. I wouldn't be afraid of any of them. But if they go down, I'd ride them down rather than jump out of the airplane with a parachute.
Is there anything that you would want your family to know about your life or about what you did while you were here on this earth that you think would be valuable for them to know while you're being videotaped? Is there anything at all you can think about you'd like them to know? Something you'd like them to carry on, either a tradition or something you would like them to do that you like to do, or some such thing as that.
I don't know of anything.
I'm too old to even
remember,
think
huh?
about it.
Well, I
You
don't
know, the worst thing about getting old, you keep forgetting things, and then with my weight, I have a problem walking anymore. And that thing there helped me out, that brace.
Your grandson has a brace just like that. He don't wear his either
Why wouldn't he?
because it bothers him like it bothers you.
Is it the same length?
When I first put it on,
Mhm.
it drives me
Think so.
nuts. But after I've had it on about 4 or 5 minutes, why, it eases up. Then I can walk with it. But when I first put it on, I feel like I got my leg in a vice.
What kind of advice would you give to the younger generation now? If you were to give advice to say to your grandchildren or your great-grandchildren?
Well, I tell them never to get mixed up with tobacco or drugs, and live a good, clean life, and it'll pay off.
What's your advice?
I was nuts for
Well,
ever
that's-
starting to smoke when I did.
That's okay what he said, and then also to get married instead of a lot of them live common law,
At least don't live with someone unless you're married.
unless you marry them. That's all.
And to raise big families or raise small families?
Well,
or-
nowadays you can't afford to have big families.
Okay.
Okay.
How about, you think they should go to church, or
You bet I do.
you think it's important for them to get an education?
Yes, I do.
How much?
Well, whatever it takes to get places in life.
Think they ought to have a college education?
Well, if they can.
You only had one of your children that got a college education here, got a degree.
Well, you did too, didn't you?
I only went to 2 years of college. I got an associate.
Oh. Well, if we lived our life over, I wouldn't mind going through school.
Going to
I had to
college.
take a special course in sewing before I got a job at the Quinn Garment Factory.
So you've had some special training.
Yeah,
Where did you take that?
Diesel.
up on in the Madison School, right across the park, I think it was.
I didn't know that. That's interesting.
What was it called?
It was a sewing class, and you learn commercial sewing. I sewed on all different kind of machines.
So you have done a lot of extensive.
That's how I got jobs.
Like you've sewn on large things like tents and
Oh,
sleeping
you bet I
bags,
have.
and you've done
We
a
did a
lot of.
lot of repair on the army clothes.
So you've done a lot of sewing in your day, haven't
That's
you?
right.
Thanks for not biting me, Diesel.
That's right. And I got along all right, but them days it was different. You have to have well, I think you could have special occupations now, don't you?
Oh yeah. Yeah, you can.
You know, something that was real funny though with Harry Leisman.
Hmm.
He had one of these white painter caps on and working outside, and some guy driving up 28th Street thought he was a painter. And he stopped his car and walked over there and he says, "Say, mister, you got time to paint me a sign?" He says, "I'm a carpenter, not a painter." But he had a painter's cap on, one of them white caps like a painter wears.
Well, our parents have had a pretty good sense of humor, and I'd say they've had a pretty good life.
And a
Not
pretty
that
good
has anything to do
and a
with
pretty good family.
it. And they've raised 4 children, and they've bought their own home and paid it off. They've become financially independent. They have a good retirement, And even though they don't know what goes on in the outside world, because they stay here and get it all off the boob tube, that they still, I think, are pretty content and happy. You're in your older age, you don't really have any desires to do anything that you haven't done already, have you?
I have no
No.
desire to go places.
You know, about
very far.
20 years ago, I'd like to get in an airplane and fly somewhere, but now at my age, I ain't interested in it. In fact, you're a lot safer home than you are out taking chances on getting killed.
And you're both in your 80s now,
Nice doggy. Nice dog.
Going on 81, I am.
and you still need to keep active, and you look
Yeah.
like you keep pretty active.
Try to.
The only thing that's active on me is my ultra stomach and my jowls.
Well, we want to thank Fred and Weldon for doing this for us today. I think
Shake hands.
I think the value of this particular afternoon, this experience, will come to light maybe years later when your grandchildren and other people that have not known you as well as we have, having been your children, will look at this. Not that we don't appreciate this, but we know a lot of this already. Will appreciate what you've told them about your life.
Hey, can you get a duplication of that tape or what?
I'm sure you can. Sure. And you can watch that along with the baseball games.
Yeah.
I think that's about it, Weldon. I don't have anything else unless Fred has something else to say.